"Sit down, Kai." That was all he said. 2 words, but they came out different. Not like a command, not like the voice that had closed billion-dollar deals and made grown men rethink their entire careers in the span of a single sentence. No. This time the voice cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Kai sat down slowly. He looked at the man across the marble desk. The man who hadn't slept. The man whose tie was loosened for the first time in the 6 weeks Kai had known him. The man whose eyes were red and raw and searching. "I found your file last night," Dominic said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. "Your emergency contact, Renata Castillo, your mother." The room went silent. Not the polished, professional silence of a 72nd floor office. A different kind. The kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Dominic leaned forward. "You knew. You knew when you walked in here. You knew when you sat in that chair for the first time. You knew every single day for 6 weeks. You looked me in the eye, and you knew." Kai did not look away. His amber eyes, the same shade as the man sitting across from him, held firm. "Yes." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Why?" And Kai, the boy who had spent 19 years growing up without this man, the boy who had carried a secret across state lines and through security clearances, and into the most powerful office in the building, the boy who had watched his father from 3 feet away every single day without saying a word, took a breath, and answered, "Because I needed to know if the man who gave me half my DNA was someone worth knowing. Not from a headline, not from a magazine cover, from a room, from a silence, from the way you hold a pencil and stand at windows and pause before you answer the hard questions." Dominic closed his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, something behind them broke open. "Now, before I tell you how this moment came to be, before I take you into the full story of these 2 people, I need you to understand something. This is not a story about revenge. This is not a story about money. This is a story about what happens when a son goes looking for a father who does not know he exists, and what happens when that father finally sees what he lost. If you are the kind of person who believes in second chances, if you believe that the truth has the power to heal even the deepest wounds, then you are in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel was built for stories exactly like this one. And trust me, you are going to want to be here for every second of what comes next. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Dominic Ashford did not become a billionaire by accident. He became one by elimination. He eliminated distraction. He eliminated sentiment. He eliminated every single thing in his life that could not be measured, optimized, or leveraged. And what was left after all that cutting was an empire. Ashford Ventures, $2.4 billion in assets, real estate development spanning 4 continents, luxury towers in Dubai, mixed-use communities in Lisbon, a waterfront district in Osaka that was being called the most ambitious urban project of the decade. His name was on skylines. His face was in magazines. His handshake was worth more than most people's entire careers. But here is what the magazines never showed. They never showed the penthouse with the ocean view and no one sitting across the dinner table. They never showed the phone that only rang for business, never for birthdays, never for someone just calling to say I was thinking about you. They never showed the reading glasses sitting on a bedside table next to a glass of whiskey and a book he never finished because there was always another deal, always another flight, always another reason to keep moving, so he would not have to sit still long enough to feel what sitting still would make him feel. His office sat on the 72nd floor of Ashford Tower in Manhattan, all glass and cold air and deliberate silence. Marble desk, no family photographs, no personal effects, just a fountain pen, a stack of documents, and the kind of emptiness that looks like power from the outside but sounds like silence from the inside. There was one thing, though, one detail most people never noticed. Behind his desk, on the credenza near the window, there was a framed photograph turned slightly inward so that anyone sitting across from him would not be able to see it. The frame was simple, dark wood, unpolished. The image inside was of a woman on a beach, dark hair caught in the wind, laughing at something just outside the frame, her skin warm in the sun, her eyes full of a joy that looked permanent, even though the man who had taken the photograph had made sure it was not. He never spoke about her, not to his attorneys, not to his board, not to the rotating cast of women who appeared beside him at galas and vanished before morning. But he never removed the photograph either. Every year, Ashford Ventures ran an associate program. 9 candidates selected from thousands of applicants. It was elite, grueling, and designed to identify the kind of mind that could operate inside Dominic's world without slowing it down. He rarely interacted with the associates directly. To him, they were instruments, tools with legs. He did not learn their names until they gave him a reason to. And that year, one of them would give him a reason he never saw coming. The morning Kai Osei walked into the 72nd floor of Ashford Tower, the clouds hung below him. That is not a metaphor. A silver mist pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the office feel less like a room and more like a chamber suspended in the sky. Weightless, untouchable, removed from everything beneath it. Dominic did not look up when he entered. He was reviewing architectural renderings for a waterfront development, his fountain pen tapping a rhythm against the edge of a blueprint. His reading glasses sat low on the bridge of his nose. His posture said everything. I built this room. You are standing in it. Act accordingly. Kai stood just inside the doorway. He did not fidget. He did not clear his throat. He did not shift his weight or glance around the room with wide eyes the way most new hires did when they saw the view for the first time. He waited, and something about the quality of that waiting, the stillness of it, the patience, made Dominic look up. The young man standing before him was lean and composed. Dark trousers, a fitted charcoal shirt with no tie. His skin was warm brown, his jaw defined, his posture grounded, and his eyes, amber, a shade that caught the diffused morning light in a way that Dominic noticed but did not examine. There was something about him, not arrogance, not nervousness, something else, something rooted. You are the new operations associate, Dominic said. It was not a question. I am. 2 words, no embellishment, no eagerness to impress, no yes sir, no thank you for the opportunity, just the first am. Dominic studied him a beat longer than necessary. I do not repeat instructions. I do not tolerate excuses. And I do not mentor. You either keep up or you disappear. Clear? Clear. No flinch, no swallow. Just those amber eyes, steady and unblinking, holding the gaze of a man who had made entire boardrooms look away. Dominic returned to his blueprint. The boy sat down, and just like that, the most important relationship of Dominic Ashford's life began, and he did not feel it start. But what Dominic could not have known, what no background check, no hiring panel, no corporate database could have revealed, was that the young man sitting 3 feet from his marble desk was his son, his blood, his child, the life he had never been told existed. And to understand how that was possible, to understand how a 19-year-old boy ended up sitting across from a father who did not recognize him, you have to go back 20 years, to a woman who loved a man who was not brave enough to love her back. Renata Castillo was 24 years old the first time she saw Dominic Ashford. She was working as a junior project coordinator at a boutique architecture firm in Lower Manhattan. It was a small operation, 12 people, a cramped office that smelled like coffee and blueprint ink, but it had a reputation for innovative residential design that had caught the attention of Ashford Ventures. The acquisition happened in 3 weeks. One morning, Renata was working for a company she loved. The next morning, she was working for a man she had never met. He showed up on a Tuesday to tour the office. She was presenting a client proposal in the small conference room when the door opened and he walked in, unannounced, flanked by 2 people who looked like they had never smiled in their professional lives. She stopped mid-sentence, not because she was intimidated, because the room changed when he entered it. The air shifted. The geometry rearranged itself around him. He was 33, dark suit, no tie, a face that was handsome in a way that had nothing to do with symmetry and everything to do with certainty. He moved like a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. He listened to the rest of her presentation without interrupting. When she finished, he asked her one question: why the courtyard? She blinked. Everyone else in the room had focused on the budget, the timeline, the materials. He had gone straight to the design choice she was most proud of. Because people do not remember buildings, she said. They remember the spaces between them. The courtyard gives the residents a reason to stay outside, a reason to see each other. That is what turns a structure into a neighborhood. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and left. She thought that was the end of it. It was not. He called her office the next day. Not her boss. Her. He wanted her input on a residential project in Brooklyn. Could she come to his office Thursday afternoon to discuss it? She went. And Thursday turned into Friday dinner. And Friday dinner turned into Saturday morning walks through neighborhoods they were both studying for different reasons. And walks turned into late nights at his penthouse, reviewing blueprints that slowly gave way to conversations that had nothing to do with architecture. He told her things he told no one, about his childhood, about his father, a man who had built a small construction company with his bare hands and then drank himself into the ground before he could enjoy it, about the fear that lived in him, the fear that everything he built would eventually collapse the way his father's life had collapsed, about his obsession with permanence, with creating things that would outlast his own body, as if buildings could be proof that he had mattered. She listened. She did not try to fix him. She did not perform concern. She just sat beside him, and the quality of her presence was so steady, so warm, so entirely without agenda, that he began to feel something he had never felt in the company of another person. Safe. They were married on a Thursday afternoon at a courthouse in Montauk. No guests, no fanfare, just two people and a judge and a feeling that felt permanent. It was not. The unraveling began almost immediately, not with a fight, not with a betrayal, with a withdrawal so gradual it felt like weather. He started working later, taking calls in other rooms, responding to her warmth with efficiency, replacing intimacy with logistics. She watched it happen with the quiet precision of a woman who understood structures, who could see the cracks forming before the wall came down. 11 weeks after their wedding, Dominic sat her down in the living room of his penthouse. The same penthouse where he had told her about his father. The same couch where she had held his hand and said nothing because nothing was what he needed. He told her it was a mistake, that he had been impulsive, that he was not built for attachment, that staying would only deepen the wound for both of them. She looked at him for a long time, and the thing she saw in his eyes was not cruelty. It was terror. He was not leaving because he did not love her. He was leaving because he did, and the weight of that love was the one thing his architecture could not support. His lawyer had already drafted the dissolution papers. She signed them, not because she agreed, because she had too much pride and too much self-respect to hold on to a man who was running from the only real thing he had ever felt. She packed her books. She walked out of his penthouse with her back straight and her heart in pieces, and she did not look back. 6 weeks later, alone in a bathroom in Portland, Oregon, Renata stared at a pregnancy test. Positive. She sat on the edge of the bathtub for 45 minutes. She pressed her hands against her stomach and breathed. She cried, and then she stopped crying, and then she cried again. She tried to reach him once. One phone call. It rang through to an assistant who did not recognize her name and asked her to submit her inquiry in writing. She hung up, and she never called again. Her son was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. She held him alone in a hospital room with fluorescent lights and the sound of rain against the window. He was small and warm and perfect, and when he opened his eyes for the first time, they were amber. She named him Kai. She gave him her mother's surname, Osei, a deliberate line drawn in ink, separating her son from a man who had made it clear that being reached was not something he was willing to allow. But here is the thing she could not bring herself to do. On the original birth certificate, the one the hospital required, there was a line for the father's name. She was exhausted. She was raw. She was alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and felt like the end and the beginning of everything at the same time. She wrote his name, Dominic Ashford, not out of hope, not out of spite, out of honesty, because the hospital asked, and she was too tired to lie. She would later file an amended certificate listing no father. She would later seal the original in a manila envelope and bury it at the bottom of a filing cabinet. But the truth was there, waiting, the way truth always does. Now let me tell you about the man who stayed, because every story about an absent father is also a story about the person who showed up in his place. And in Kai's life, that person was Gabriel Osei. Gabriel was a structural engineer. Renata met him at a community design workshop when Kai was 3 years old. He was presenting on affordable housing frameworks. She was there to network. Their eyes met over a shared table of materials, and she noticed two things about him immediately. His hands were steady, and his voice was kind. Their courtship was not a whirlwind. It was a sunrise, slow, warm, gradual enough that by the time you realized it had happened, it already felt like it had always been there. Gabriel did not try to replace anyone. He did not perform fatherhood. He simply arrived. He showed up on Saturday mornings with pancake batter. He read to Kai every single night. Not because someone asked him to, but because that is who he was. He taught Kai to ride a bike in the park across the street and sat on the curb with a box of Band-Aids and a patience that seemed to have no bottom. When Kai was 5, Gabriel married Renata. A small ceremony in the backyard of the house they had found together. A house with a garden where Renata grew tomato plants and a dining room table that always had drafting paper on one end and crayons on the other. Jazz records on Sunday mornings. Hikes through Forest Park on weekends. A kitchen that smelled like garlic and onions and the kind of warmth that does not come from a stove. Kai grew up calling Gabriel Dad. Not because anyone told him to, but because the word belongs to the person who earns it, and Gabriel earned it every single day without ever once asking for credit. Kai grew up whole. He grew up grounded. He grew up brilliant and quiet and observant, with a gift for seeing the things that other people missed. He got into Columbia on a near-full scholarship. He studied urban development and organizational systems. He had a calm confidence that made professors pause and classmates pay attention. He grew up loved. And love, when it is real, when it is steady, when it does not come with conditions or exits, builds something in a person that no amount of money or power can replicate. But even the most solid ground can shift. And Kai's shifted on a Thursday afternoon, 7 months before he walked into Ashford Tower. He was home from his first year at Columbia, helping his mother digitize old tax records. A mundane task. The kind of thing you do on a slow afternoon with music playing and a glass of iced tea sweating on the counter. He was pulling files from the bottom drawer of a cabinet in the hallway when his hand found something that did not belong with tax documents, a manila envelope sealed with tape, yellowed at the edges, hidden or forgotten, he could not tell which. He opened it. Inside was a single document, a birth certificate, not the one he had seen before, the amended one that listed Gabriel Osei as his father. This was the original, the first one. Father, Dominic Ashford. He read it 3 times. Then he sat down on the hallway floor and read it again. He did not confront his mother that day. He sat with it for 3 days. He turned the name over in his mind until it lost all shape, and then he searched it, and the internet delivered everything that a birth certificate could not. The Empire, the magazine covers, the Forbes profiles, the TED Talk about permanent architecture, the buildings, the skylines, the cold, towering brilliance of a man who built structures meant to outlast everything, including the people he left behind. Kai stared at the photographs, and in the line of the jaw, in the set of the shoulders, in the way the man stood at a podium with his hands clasped behind his back and his chin slightly raised, reading the room instead of performing for it, Kai saw himself. On the 3rd night, he brought the envelope to his mother. She was in the garden, kneeling beside the tomato plants, her hands dark with soil, her face calm and focused. He stood at the back door and held up the envelope without saying a word. She looked up, and the moment she saw what he was holding, every trace of color drained from her face. They sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Gabriel was at work. The house was quiet except for the clock in the hallway and the distant sound of traffic. She told him everything. The acquisition, the conference room, the courtyard question, the walks, the late nights, the courthouse in Montauk, the 11 weeks, the dissolution papers, the phone call that ended at an assistant's desk. She told it without bitterness, without venom, because she had burned through all of that years ago. What was left was something quieter, something heavier, sorrow. He does not know about you, she said. I need you to understand that, Kai. He did not reject you. He never knew you existed. Why did you not tell him? Because he made it clear that I did not matter enough to hear. She paused. And I refused to let you grow up waiting by the door for a man who might never knock. Kai was quiet for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. A car passed outside. I want to go to him, he said. Renata shook her head slowly. Not to confront him, Kai continued. Not to demand anything. I want to see who he is, from inside a room, without a headline between us. You have no idea what you are walking into, she said. I'm asking you to trust me, he replied. Not him, me. She did not answer that night. She sat with Gabriel in the dark living room after Kai had gone to bed, and Gabriel held her hand and said very little, because Gabriel had always understood that some silences carry more weight than words ever could. 3 weeks later, Kai submitted his application to Ashford Ventures' associate program. Now, if you discovered that your father was someone you had never met, someone powerful, someone who did not even know you existed, what would you do? Would you go to him? Would you protect yourself and stay away? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I genuinely want to know what you would do. And while you are there, hit that like button if this story is already getting to you, because trust me, we are just getting started. Kai's preparation was methodical. He did not rush. He did not obsess. He studied Ashford Ventures the way he studied everything. Quietly, thoroughly, without announcing himself, he spent 4 months learning the company's portfolio. He mapped their international exposure, identified supply chain vulnerabilities in their Southeast Asian developments, analyzed their zoning challenges in Lisbon, and reviewed every publicly available municipal filing related to their Osaka waterfront project. He translated Portuguese municipal documents. He read Japanese urban planning journals. He did all of this from a desk in his apartment in New York, with a legal pad and a laptop and the kind of focus that most people mistake for obsession but is actually just discipline. He applied using his legal name, Kai Osei. He listed Columbia, his coursework, his internship at a Portland planning firm. He did not mention his mother's name. He did not mention Montauk. He did not mention the manila envelope. The interview lasted 45 minutes, nearly double the length of any other candidate's session, not because he was aggressive, but because every answer he gave made the panel ask another question. He understood the company's risk landscape better than 2 of the senior directors interviewing him. He spoke clearly, without performance, without trying to impress. He simply showed them what he knew and let the knowledge speak for itself. He was one of 9 selected from over 2,000 applicants. The night he got the call, Renata heard it from the kitchen. She did not come out to celebrate. She sat at the table, pressed her hands flat against the wood, and breathed the way she had breathed on a rainy Tuesday in March 19 years ago, when the world changed and she had to decide whether she was strong enough to meet it. Gabriel found her there 20 minutes later. He sat beside her and put his hand over hers. "He is going," she said. "I know," Gabriel replied. "What if he gets hurt? Then he comes home. And we are here." Kai packed the night before he left for Manhattan. His childhood room was small and full of things that mattered. Books, blueprints he had drawn as a teenager, a photograph of Gabriel teaching him to fish at the lake near Mount Hood. Gabriel appeared in the doorway. "You do not owe that man anything, Kai. Whatever you find out there, you bring yourself home. You hear me?" Kai looked at the man who had raised him, the man who had never once flinched at the word dad, even though biology had never given him the right to claim it, the man who had earned it with pancake batter and Band-Aids and bedtime stories and 20 years of showing up without condition. "I hear you," Kai said. And then he left. He arrived in Manhattan on a Sunday evening. He took the subway to Midtown. He walked the last 4 blocks on foot. And when he turned the corner and looked up at Ashford Tower, 72 floors of glass reaching into a sky that was turning purple and gold, he stopped. His father had built that. His father's name was etched into the stone above the entrance. His father's vision was carved into every line and angle and surface of the building that rose above him, like a monument to a man he had never met. Kai stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Then he took a breath, adjusted the strap of his bag on his shoulder, and walked inside. The first 2 weeks were invisible ones. Kai moved through the building like water, present but unobtrusive. He attended briefings, organized files, shadowed senior associates, and compiled reports with a thoroughness that made people forget how young he was. He spoke only when the silence needed breaking and asked questions so precise that the people answering them often paused, surprised at the depth behind the inquiry. He learned the rhythms of the building, the morning rush of the trading floor 3 levels below, the quiet tension of the legal department, the controlled chaos of the international development team, and above it all, the 72nd floor, where Dominic Ashford moved through his days like a man who had built the world and was now simply maintaining it. Kai watched him from a distance, in meetings, in hallways, through glass walls. He studied the way Dominic entered a room, always scanning it before speaking, always positioning himself where he could see the door. He studied the way Dominic listened, with a stillness that made other people talk too much. He studied the way Dominic's face changed when he thought no one was watching, the way the sharpness softened into something that looked almost like exhaustion, or loneliness, or both. And Kai felt something he had not expected to feel. Not anger, not resentment, curiosity. The same curiosity that had driven him to open the manila envelope. The same curiosity that had driven him to apply for the program. A deep, Steady, unrelenting need to understand the architecture of the man who had helped create him and then vanish from the blueprint. That changed on day 14. Ashford Ventures was locked in a stalled negotiation with the Portuguese municipal authority over the Lisbon development. Permits had been frozen for 6 weeks. The legal team had drafted responses that went nowhere. The international development team had proposed political escalation. Dominic had called a strategy session. 12 people around a conference table, frustration rising, voices beginning to overlap. Kai was there to take minutes. He sat at the edge of the room, pen in hand, recording the conversation with the quiet precision that had become his signature. The head of international development was arguing for a formal appeal through Lisbon's administrative court. The legal team was pushing back, citing timeline concerns. The CFO wanted to restructure the budget to absorb the delays. The room was going in circles. Kai set his pen down. "If I may," he said. The room turned. 12 pairs of eyes. One of them belonged to Dominic Ashford, who was sitting at the head of the table with his reading glasses in his hand and an expression that could have been irritation or curiosity. Kai spoke for less than 2 minutes. "The dispute is not regulatory," he said. "It is cultural." The municipal authority received pushback from a local preservation society, the Sociedade Histórica do Bairro Alto. They believe the development will overshadow a historic neighborhood, specifically the sightlines from the Miradouro de Santa Catarina. The council has been responsive to their concerns because the society has significant public support. A legal appeal will not resolve this. A design amendment will reduce the height of the eastern wing by 2 stories. Incorporate a public courtyard that references traditional Portuguese Praca architecture. Open the ground floor to community use. It is not a concession. It is a conversation, and it will move faster than any court filing. Silence. Then the head of international development leaned back in his chair and said, "That is actually the answer." The room shifted. People began talking, but the energy was different now. Constructive instead of circular. Kai picked his pen back up and resumed taking notes as if he had not just redirected the entire meeting. After the room cleared, Dominic remained seated. Kai was gathering his materials near the door. "How long have you been here?" Dominic asked. 2 weeks, Kai said. "Who told you about the Preservation Society?" "No one. I read the municipal council's public comment filings. They are available online in Portuguese. I translated them." Dominic removed his glasses. He looked at the young man standing near the door, this boy who had been in the building for 14 days and had just solved a problem that had stumped his senior team for 6 weeks. "Stay after the briefing tomorrow," Dominic said. "I want a second perspective on the Osaka proposal." It was not praise. It was not warmth. But for Dominic Ashford, it was a door opening. Not wide, just a crack. But the light that came through it was enough to change the shape of everything that followed. What happened next was slow, gravitational, the kind of shift that does not announce itself but rearranges everything. Dominic began pulling Kai into his orbit. Not from affection, from recognition. The boy had instincts that did not belong to a 19-year-old. He could enter a room full of conflict and find the pressure point within minutes. He asked questions that made senior executives reconsider positions they had held for months. And he did it all without performance, without hunger for recognition, without the desperate need to be seen that Dominic had learned to spot and dismiss in nearly everyone around him. They worked late on the Osaka proposal, reviewed risk assessments for the Dubai Tower, dissected a supply chain bottleneck in Jakarta that was costing the company $11,000 a day. Kai's analyses were clean, his recommendations precise, his instincts almost unsettling in their accuracy. But it was not the work that got under Dominic's skin. It was the other thing, the thing he could not name. The way Kai held a pencil, between his second and third fingers, turning it slowly when he was thinking. Dominic held a pen the same way, had done so since he was a teenager. It was a habit so specific, so particular, that seeing it mirrored in another person felt less like coincidence and more like something he did not have a word for. The way Kai stood at windows, hands clasped behind his back, not looking at his phone, not checking his watch, just standing there, reading the skyline, as if the city were a text and he was studying its grammar. Dominic did that every evening. Same posture, same focus, same stillness. The way Kai paused before answering a difficult question, not from uncertainty, from precision. The need to deliver the answer exactly right, not approximately, exactly. Dominic knew that pause. It was his own. He had never catalogued these habits in himself. They were as invisible to him as the furniture in a room he had lived in for decades. But seeing them in another person, seeing them in this specific person, stirred something deep and unsettled in a place he had sealed shut 20 years ago. He did not examine the feeling. He buried it under schedules and spreadsheets and the next meeting and the next flight. But it was there, like a door tapping softly in a wind he could not locate, like a melody playing in another room that he almost recognized but could not quite name. One evening, 3 weeks into Kai's time at the company, Kai returned to the 72nd floor to retrieve a tablet he had left in the conference room. It was after 8. The floor was empty. The cleaning crew had already come and gone. As he passed Dominic's office, he glanced through the glass wall and stopped. Dominic was sitting at his desk, not working, not reading, just sitting. His hands were folded in front of him. His face was unguarded, softened, stripped of every layer of authority and control that he wore like armor during the day. He was looking at the photograph on the credenza, the one turned slightly inward, the woman on the beach with the dark hair and the wind and the laugh. Kai stood in the hallway and watched his father look at a photograph of his mother. And something shifted inside him, something he had not anticipated, something he was not prepared for. He had come here to observe, to gather information, to make a rational decision about a man he had never known. He had not come here to feel this ache, this strange, complicated, unwanted tenderness for a man who was sitting alone in a glass tower, holding on to the image of a woman he had been too afraid to keep. Kai cleared his throat. Dominic's head snapped up. The armor returned instantly. The softness vanished. "Forgot my tablet," Kai said. "Conference room. 3rd shelf." Kai nodded and walked away. The moment passed, but it did not disappear. That night, Kai called Gabriel. He sat on the edge of his bed in his small apartment in Queens and dialed the number and waited. "Hey kid," Gabriel said. "Hey dad. How is it going?" Kai was quiet for a moment. "It is harder than I thought it would be." Gabriel did not ask what he meant. He did not push. He just let the silence hold until Kai was ready. "The hard things usually are," Gabriel said. "That is how you know they matter." Kai pressed his palm against his eyes and breathed. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, kid. Always." The cracks began to show 5 weeks in. It started with a comment. A senior associate named Vivian, sharp and observant and slightly competitive in the way that people who have worked their entire careers for a single promotion tend to be. The team was at a dinner after a long day of negotiations. Dominic's photograph hung on the wall of the restaurant, part of a series on the city's most influential developers. Vivian glanced at the photograph, then at Kai, then back at the photograph. "Has anyone ever told you that you stand exactly like him?" she said. "Same posture, same jaw. It is uncanny." The table laughed. Someone made a joke about the company cloning its CEO. Kai smiled, but beneath the table, his hand tightened around his glass. He laughed it off, but the comment lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. Because if one person had noticed, others could too. And if others noticed, the question would eventually reach Dominic. And Kai was not ready for that. He did not know if he would ever be ready for that. 3 days later, the crack widened. Renata saw the article. It was a profile in Architectural Digest, a feature on Ashford Ventures' expansion into sustainable urban design. Dominic was photographed in his office, mid-gesture, explaining a model of a waterfront development. And just behind him, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, stood Kai. Same jawline, same posture, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, weight balanced on the balls of his feet. Same way of watching a room as if he were quietly mapping its architecture. Renata set down her coffee, enlarged the image, stared at it until her hands began to tremble. She called Gabriel. "He looks exactly like him," she said, standing right next to him. "How has no one seen it?" "Maybe someone has," Gabriel replied. His voice was steady. Gabriel's voice was always steady. The man was built like bedrock. What happens when Dominic notices? When someone points it out? Gabriel was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Maybe that does not have to be the worst thing." Renata did not respond. She called Kai that evening, tried to keep her voice casual, asked about work, about the city, about whether he was eating enough. Normal questions. Safe questions. But Kai heard the tremor underneath, and he understood what she had seen. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I am fine." "Are you?" He paused. "I am fine." Neither of them believed the other. That night, alone in his apartment, Kai sat on the edge of his bed and felt the weight of everything he was carrying settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. The secret, the proximity, the growing tenderness for a man he had every right to resent. The fear that the truth would not heal anything, but would instead detonate the fragile structure he had built between who he was and who he was pretending to be. For the first time since arriving in New York, he considered walking away, submitting his resignation, packing his bag, going home to Portland, to the house with the jazz records and the tomato plants, and the man who had never needed a blood test to call him son. But then he thought of Dominic sitting alone at his desk at 8 o'clock at night, looking at a photograph of a woman he had let go. And he thought of the way Dominic's voice had sounded when he said, "Stay after the briefing tomorrow," not commanding but reaching, like a man extending his hand toward something he could not quite see. Kai could not leave. Not yet. The door was still tapping. The melody was still playing, and he needed to hear the rest of it. "Now I need you to think about this. What would you do if you were Kai? Would you reveal the truth? Would you walk away? Would you stay, knowing that every day brings you closer to a moment that could change everything or destroy it?" Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share this video with them. Trust me, they will thank you for it. The unraveling began on a Wednesday. It was mundane, the way the most seismic moments usually are. Not a confrontation, not a dramatic reveal. A personnel file. The associate program's mid-year evaluation required Dominic's signature. He never reviewed the files personally. That was what his chief of staff was for. But his chief of staff was out with the flu, and the deadline was that afternoon, so the files were placed on his desk with a sticky note that read, "Please sign." He opened them one by one, scanning grades, interview scores, performance reviews, mechanical work, routine. Then he opened Kai's file. Academic record, exceptional. Interview scores, exceptional. Performance reviews, exceptional. Nothing surprising, nothing he did not already know. Then he saw the emergency contact line. Renata Castillo. He stopped reading. The name hit him like a hand against glass. Sharp, sudden, fracturing something he had not known was still fragile. Castillo, not Ashford. The name she had used before. The name she had taken back after 11 weeks of being Renata Ashford. The name she would have returned to when she left his penthouse with her books and her dignity and her heart in pieces. His mind began to move. Fast, methodical, the same way it moved through acquisition strategies and risk assessments, but this time the data points were not financial. They were personal. They were devastating. Emergency contact. Mother. Renata Castillo. Portland. The boy is 19. 19 years ago, Renata had left. She had tried to call once. His assistant had asked her to submit her inquiry in writing. What if the inquiry had been this? He closed the file, opened it, closed it again. His hands were shaking. He walked to the window. 72 floors below, millions of lives moved through systems he had helped design. For the first time in decades, the ground felt unsteady beneath him. He picked up his phone, called his personal attorney. It was nearly 10 at night. The attorney answered on the second ring because when Dominic Ashford called, "You answered." "I need you to find something," Dominic said. His voice was controlled but barely. "A birth certificate. State of Oregon. Approximately 19 years ago. Mother's name, Renata Castillo." A long silence on the other end. "Dominic, what is this about?" "Just find it." The document arrived in his inbox at 11:47 that night. Child, Kai Castillo Osei. Mother, Renata Castillo. Father, Dominic Ashford. He read it 7 times. Each time, the words rearranged something foundational inside him, something structurally unsound for 19 years that was only now, finally, collapsing. His son, the boy with the amber eyes who held a pencil between his second and third fingers, the boy who stood at windows with his hands behind his back, reading the skyline like a language. The boy who paused before every difficult answer because precision mattered more than speed. His son, standing 3 feet from his desk for 6 weeks, working beside him, solving problems, asking questions, carrying a truth that could have detonated everything and choosing every single day not to. Dominic pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. The city glittered below him, beautiful and indifferent. And he felt something he had not permitted himself to feel in 20 years. Everything, all at once. The loss, the regret, the wasted years, the phone call he never answered, the woman on the beach with the dark hair and the laugh and the question about the courtyard, the courthouse in Montauk, the dissolution papers, the silence, the 19 years of silence. He did not sleep. He did not call anyone. He sat in his office until the darkness outside the windows turned gray, and the gray turned pale, and the city began to wake up beneath him, unaware that 72 floors above, a man was finally seeing the ground he had spent his entire life trying to rise above. Kai arrived at 7:15, early, as always. He walked toward Dominic's office, carrying the morning briefing documents and a coffee he had picked up from the lobby. He stepped through the doorway and stopped. Dominic was at his desk, unshaven. His tie was loosened. His jacket was draped over the back of his chair. His eyes were red and raw, and there was something in his face that Kai had never seen there before. Openness. "You are here early," Kai said. "I never left." The words hung between them. Kai set the documents and the coffee on the edge of the desk and remained standing. "Is everything all right?" Dominic looked at him. Not the way he usually looked at him, the efficient assessment, the professional acknowledgement. This was different. This was the way you look at something you have been missing without knowing it was gone. He saw Renata in the line of Kai's cheekbones. He saw himself in the set of his jaw, in the steadiness of his hands, in the quiet architecture of his posture. He saw 19 years of absence given a face. "Sit down, Kai," he said, and his voice carried no authority. It carried need. Kai sat. "I found your file last night," Dominic said. His hands were on the desk, but they were not still. "Your emergency contact, Renata Castillo. Your mother." The room fell into the kind of silence that has weight, the kind that presses against your chest and makes the clock on the wall sound like a heartbeat. "You knew," Dominic said. It was not an accusation. It was understanding, arriving all at once, complete and devastating. "You knew when you walked in here. You knew when you sat in that chair. You knew every single day." Kai held his gaze. Those amber eyes, Dominic's eyes, the same shade that had looked back at him from mirrors for 52 years. "Yes," Kai said. "Why?" The question filled the room. "Why did you come? Why did you stay? Why did you sit 3 feet from me and say nothing? Why did you solve my problems and attend my meetings and stand at my windows and carry this weight without cracking?" Kai was quiet for a long time, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same precision Dominic recognized as his own, but tempered with something Dominic had never possessed. A gentleness, a warmth, the unmistakable mark of a man named Gabriel Ose who had spent 19 years proving that love is not a bloodline. "It is a choice. Because I needed to know if the man who gave me half my DNA was someone worth knowing," Kai said. "Not from a headline, not from a magazine cover, from a room, from a silence, from the way you hold a pencil and stand at windows and pause before you answer the hard questions." Dominic's breath caught in his chest. "And," he whispered, "I think you are someone who made a terrible choice 19 years ago, not because you were cruel, because you were afraid. And I think you have been building towers ever since to avoid looking at the ground you left behind." The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water, every ripple visible, every ripple felt. Dominic's composure, the carefully constructed facade that had held firm through hostile takeovers and market crashes and 20 years of deliberately chosen solitude, began to break. "I did not know," he said, "about you. She tried to call once and I—" His voice cracked. "I built a system that made me unreachable. And it worked. God help me, it worked." "I know," Kai said quietly. "She told me everything." Dominic looked at him. "Is she well? Is she happy?" "She is extraordinary," Kai said. "She built a life that would humble most empires, and she did it without a single floor of glass." A sound escaped Dominic's throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between, something deeply, unforgivably human. He pressed his knuckles against his mouth and breathed through it. His shoulders shook once, then again. "I do not deserve to know you," he said. "Maybe not," Kai replied. "But I did not come here for what you deserve. I came for what I need." "What do you need?" Kai paused. And inside that pause lived everything. The manila envelope at the bottom of the filing cabinet, the kitchen table, the phone call that ended at an assistant's desk, 19 years of silence, jazz records on Sunday mornings, hikes through Forest Park, Band-Aids on scraped knees, a man named Gabriel who read to him every single night and never once needed a blood test to prove he was a father. A beginning, Kai said, not a correction, not an apology tour, just a beginning. Dominic opened his eyes. The morning light had shifted, warming the marble, softening the glass, changing the texture of the room, making it feel for the first time, not like a monument to power, but like a place where something fragile and necessary could actually take root. I do not know how to do this, Dominic admitted. Neither do I, Kai said. And then, for the first time since he had walked into Ashford Tower, he smiled. But I learned fast, and from what I have seen, so do you. Dominic looked at his son. His son. The word was new and terrifying and enormous, and it did not fit comfortably in his mouth or in his mind, but it fit precisely and undeniably in the place where it mattered most. And outside the window, 72 floors above the streets of Manhattan, the morning mist parted. The clouds that had pressed against the glass for weeks, keeping the world below hidden and unreachable, finally thinned and separated and dissolved. And for the first time in 19 years, Dominic Ashford could see the ground. Some people believe that blood makes a family, that DNA is destiny, that the person who gives you life is the person who defines it. But Kai Osei already had a father, a man named Gabriel who showed up every single day, who read to him every single night, who taught him that strength is not the ability to stand alone, but the willingness to stand beside someone else, who loved him without condition, without reservation, without ever needing a reason beyond the simple, extraordinary fact that he was there. What Kai went looking for was not a father. He already had the best one. What he went looking for was an answer. The answer to a question that had lived inside him since the moment he opened that manila envelope. Is the man who left worth understanding? And what Dominic Ashford found was not redemption. Redemption is too simple a word for something this complicated. What he found was a beginning, the kind that only comes when you stop building walls and start sitting in rooms with the truth. The real measure of a man is not the empire he builds. It is not the skyline he reshapes, or the net worth that follows his name. The real measure of a man is the people he is willing to be vulnerable with. It is the phone call he answers. It is the door he opens when every instinct tells him to keep it shut. It is the courage to look at the damage he has done and say, not I can fix this, but I am willing to try. And sometimes, just sometimes, it is a 19-year-old boy with amber eyes and a quiet courage forged in a house full of love, walking into a tower of glass and saying the truest thing anyone has ever said to the most powerful man in the room. I did not come for what you deserve. I came for what I need. If this story moved you, if it made you think about forgiveness, about family, about what it really means to show up, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what part of this story hit you the hardest. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have not subscribed yet, welcome to the family. I am Mr. David, and I will see you in the next one.